Everyone's at a point in their life right now where they're trying to de-Google, and it's for a couple reasons, right? Because Google is increasing their surveillance, mapping out everything that we're doing on the internet against our will, and violating our privacy for that. But also, the services have generally become of worse quality. I feel like YouTube videos load slower than they used to. Google Drive definitely doesn't support anything over 100 megabits per second upload and download speed. So as a result, it feels like the Google services are just not worth paying for anymore. That, I think, is the context with which I was going into building my own home lab. I was already a tech person. I'm a computer science major, but I'd also been building computers and repairing my laptops. So I figured, what the hell, why not get into home labbing? It was probably one of the single best things I ever did. But probably like you, I was on quite a stringent budget. So here's how I home labbed with just $70 in my pocket. So the hardware that I used is a Lenovo ThinkCentre M700. It is a total piece of crap. It would be e-waste if not for the fact that I had turned it into a home lab. It has an Intel Pentium G4400T, I believe, clocked at 2.9 gigahertz. The Pentium is the successor to the Intel dual core, so it only has 2 cores, 4 threads. It's just not viable for most modern consumers as a desktop, but it works perfectly as a server, because on top of that, it actually has 16 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM, which is more than enough to run a bunch of processes all at once. And that's really what you need with a server anyways. GPU-wise, it's a tiny computer. It has Intel integrated graphics from 10 years ago. It's nothing to write home about. I got all that for $50 in January off some guy on Facebook Marketplace. But then I realized I needed some storage. My grandma actually had 2 computers that she was just gonna throw out otherwise, and they still had 1 terabyte hard disks in them, and they weren't that old by that point, so I figured may as well put them to good use. So I bought a $20 hard drive enclosure off of Amazon, and I put both of those hard drives into that, and I set them up in a RAID 0 configuration. RAID stands for Random or Redundant Array of Independent or Inexpensive Disks. So basically what RAID 0 is it turns 2 1 terabyte hard drives into 1 2 terabyte hard drive, and that has absolutely worked perfectly for my needs. Software-wise, the whole system is running Arch Linux. It's just what I know. Instead of trying to run all of these things on bare metal, which is actually quite unsafe, I went with just generic Docker for the whole stack. And as you're about to see, there's actually a lot of things here. But Docker is a really powerful container management service, and it's completely free and open source. And the other software that I use here is ButterFS. That is just to manage the RAID configuration for the 2 hard disks. Alright, so I have a ton of Docker containers running, but I think it's important to talk about my goals that I had going into this. I wanted to be able to share this with people off of my local network. That would involve port forwarding and exposing ports to the internet, which is inherently unsafe. That's one of the biggest reasons I went with Docker instead of trying to run these things on bare metal. I also wanted it to be a pretty long-term solution, so stability was also a key goal, which I think is another reason why I chose Docker over bare metal. If something stops working on bare metal, it's not working anymore. If it stops working on Docker, you just spin up the container again. Like I said before, I wanted it to be cheap, so I only used free tools. All of the tools that I talk about in this video are completely free and open source, which means they can just be run in a Docker container on any computer anywhere. So let's talk about them. The head honcho of all the Docker containers is the Nginx reverse proxy. Nginx is a really powerful reverse proxy manager. Because it's free and open source, it actually offers a lot of plugins for other protocols like RTMP. You can even use it to proxy Minecraft connections. You can use it to proxy basically about anything, but built in, it proxies HTTP requests, which is exactly what I need, because basically all of these apps run over HTTP anyways. It also allows you to have one point of entry for all of the traffic into your server. That means that you can monitor all that traffic coming through one stream. It also means you don't have to put a port number in a URL when you send it to somebody, which I thought was ugly and I didn't want to do that. It also means that you only have to expose one port instead of potentially dozens of ports on your router. The first service that I set up was File Browser. It's like Google Drive. It just allows you to upload files and then download them again sometime. You can even edit some kinds of files, plain text files typically, in the app. I think it's really amazing. I set it up under a subdomain. All of these are set up under a subdomain of my home server through the Nginx proxy. The next service that I set up was Jellyfin. Jellyfin is a media hosting and metadata manager. When you put a video into Jellyfin, Jellyfin actually like reaches out to its databases and pulls back the information that it has on that video, such as subtitles and the like canonical title and stuff. It just makes hosting media really easy. The next service I set up was Minecraft because I actually wanted to play Minecraft on a server with my brother, but I didn't want to pay for a Minecraft server. So I figured I can probably host that in a Docker container, right? The answer is yes, but it doesn't run over HTTP. Minecraft runs over ports, if you're on Java, 25565, and on Bedrock 19132. Either you have to proxy it through Nginx, which is a little bit complicated since it's not HTTP, or you have to expose those ports on your router. And if you don't know what you're doing and you expose ports willy-nilly on your router, something bad is going to happen to whatever device is hooked up on the other end. I did expose those ports on my router. I have a whitelist for a couple of my friends and I. Since it's running in a Docker container, the idea is that if somebody crashes the server, somebody does something bad on the server, I just wipe the server, or you just restart the Docker container. So the next thing that I hosted was MediaWiki. Now, MediaWiki is a really powerful tool. It actually is the tool that powers Wikipedia. I did it because I write a lot of fantasy, and so I wanted a place to store ideas and connect them. I also like to have the idea of having a wiki that I could share with people. It's interesting because MediaWiki actually requires a Postgres database to be able to store images and metadata about images. If you just follow the guide from the MediaWiki website on setting it up in a Docker container, it will go much easier than I think trying to run MediaWiki on bare metal. That has actually been really successful. It allows you even to customize branding, colors, and templates, all around amazing experience. MediaWiki is amazing. Eventually, I learned that you can just have a search engine aggregator that does the searching for you instead of doing it on your computer. That way, it looks like there's just one device making a request, and Google's not tracking your actual device. So I set up CRXNG on my home server. I think this is the one service where I'd be like, I would consider spending a little bit more if you're going to run this kind of thing, because since it's a search engine aggregator, what it does is it reaches out to a bunch of search engines and then returns the results for you. It takes about 1 second, 1 to 2 seconds per search. So you do feel a little bit of a delay, unlike stock Google or stock Bing or something, where they're designed to have a much faster rate of service. However, because it's basically just me using this search engine aggregator anyways, pretty much perfectly fine. And the amazing thing about it is it comes built in with this image search and book search and things like that. So the next service I set up was Image, because I'd been using Google Photos for a long time. And so I was like, there's gotta be some alternative to Google Photos. Image is a perfect alternative to Google Photos. It's completely free and completely open source. It runs perfectly in a Docker container. A lot like MediaWiki, it requires an extra database, but if you follow the installation guide from the Image Wiki, you're gonna have no problem. The only thing I would tell you is images get pretty big these days. I would just invest in a little bit more storage if that's what you're gonna do. I think my images take up about probably close to 150 megabytes. I would invest a little bit more there. The last thing I use actually kind of wraps everything together in a nice little bow for me to see. I actually use Portainer so that I can see which containers are running and their statuses. Portainer is also open source. I'm pretty sure it's open source. I know that it's free because it's running in a Docker container. It is a Docker container, and it is reading information about all the other Docker containers. So that can actually be a problem if you don't set up your permissions correctly. Portainer is just wonderful though. You can even spin up containers from within Portainer. I personally don't do that because I have a lot of configurations I do, so I write a lot of Docker Compose just for me and my specific situation. So the other big thing here is DNS. If you want to share things with people off of your network, you don't want to have to send them your IP address. So instead, you probably want to send them a URL or a host name. And to do that, you need to set up DNS records. This is the only part of this whole thing that I actually pay for. I probably pay about $10 a year for the domain cagebuilder.net. I do it through Cloudflare because, in my opinion, Cloudflare is just the most robust, the least evil DNS hoster. There are other DNS hosters, surely, but like GoDaddy and Squarespace, I believe, are both Google offshoots, which is not good. You don't want to buy from Google. Please don't do that. You can buy from Namecheap. I don't know who owns Namecheap, but the deals are about the same between Namecheap and Cloudflare anyways. So Cloudflare also comes with a bunch of developer tools and allows you to more neatly customize your DNS. So it actually meant that I could set up a mail server. The other thing about it is that if you're a consumer of internet like I am, you probably don't have a static IP address. So I would recommend using a dynamic DNS Docker container. That way, every time you restart the container, it's going to check, hey, is this IP address match the IP address that I am right now? If not, let me change it. If it is, cool, then you just shut down. Totally worthwhile. That's completely free. I just use like a Cloudflare DDNS Docker container that I found somewhere on Docker Hub. The other thing that I would recommend is to set up SSL. If you don't know, SSL stands for Secure Socket Layer. Basically everything on the internet these days anyways is encrypted with SSL, but you don't want to have your stuff exposed on the public internet if you are indeed using your stuff on the public internet. Setting up SSL will allow you to encrypt your traffic through the internet. And for that, just go with Let's Encrypt or Certbot. They're the same thing. Let's Encrypt is a free and open source project to issue everybody who wants one an SSL certificate for their domain. Totally worthwhile if you're gonna go this DNS route. If you don't go this DNS route, you're gonna have to set up a VPN, probably with something like Tailscale. I don't know anything about that. There are a million videos on this platform dedicated to getting you started with Tailscale. I said at the beginning that this was like the easiest $70 spend of my life, and it kind of was, but in hindsight, I might have spent a little bit more if I knew what this was going to turn into. I'm kind of addicted to homelabbing now. Even though my setup lives on the bottom shelf of a bookcase in the living room, so nobody really sees it or asks any questions about it, there are so many more things that I want to do with my home server that I'm just limited by because of the hardware. Since I already have the hardware, there's no point in, really for me at least, investing in new hardware so that I can do the things that I want to do. I'm happy enough with $70 right now that it has probably already paid itself back in subscriptions that I've canceled. If you're not a tech person, starting a home lab is going to be one of those things that like totally teaches you about tech. I just can't describe how many networking things I didn't understand until I started home labbing. Like what a reverse proxy is, or DNS records, or dynamic DNS, or IP addressing, and stuff like that. It's 100% worth it if you can to start a home lab however you can. A home lab doesn't have to be a desktop PC either. It can be any sort of hardware that you have. If you have an old laptop, congratulations, you have the beginning of a home lab. Everything's a home lab if you work hard enough.